Thanks for tuning in once again to Prime Sports NASCAR Prime Sports Radio Network as we get ready for another West Coast race. This one in Phoenix. So welcome in Eric Smith and Eric. So far, uh, it's been I don't know. I mean, it's contrasting races out here in the West Coast the first couple of weeks because remember last week. Well, you weren't on the air last week, but last week I was talking to CJ about the fact that Blaney gets into a situation where all he needed was the same non-caution type of racing that we had witnessed on that track over the last couple of years. We talked about it the week before about no cautions
hmm
at the track. And then of course what happens but a late caution comes out and whether it's a right call or a wrong call, you know, Blaney and Gordon, they make the wrong call and lose the race. So last week, even though Blaney winds up leaving the race, last week, Blaney needs a caution until he left the race, and there was no caution. And it was back to the old caution free racing. So very weird how that kind of took place the last couple of weeks. I'm not sure what it told us, if anything.
The only thing I think we could take from it is at least seems like Bowman and Blaney are the two best cars right now on the whole series. They're the top two the last 2 weeks. If the caution doesn't fly in Vegas, they finish 1-2. And if Blaney's tire doesn't just degrade like it did in Fontana, they once again finish 1-2. So I'd say right now those are the top two drivers. And other than that, Toyota maybe regressing a little bit and Chevrolet getting better. I think other than that, there's not a whole lot we can take from these first 3 weeks. Yes.
Well, Bowman though, I I feel good because he's on my fantasy team, so he's off
Yep.
to a nice start. And not many people, including me, thought last week was going to be a race that we were going to see him perform the way that he did uh, until practice began. And he had a very good
Yeah.
run of practices that led you to believe that he could have a good race, and he did.
Yeah, he coming into last week in Fontana, he'd never finished in the top 20 before, and that's why he was 28-1 when it started off. And I jumped in on him before, or once practice was done, the odds are updated, and he only moved like 22-1, 20-1, something like that, because I think the odds makers weren't looking at practice too. I guess they weren't putting a whole lot of stock into it. They were still looking at past stats, and I saw single lap speed quickest in both practices, 5 lap average, 10 lap averages, quickest in both practice. So that immediately told me he's got something. So I went ahead and threw him in on covers and threw him in on a couple picks for myself, and it paid off. I mean, he was by far leaps and bounds the best car, which told me that while 2019 looked like it rolled over into 2020, there's still certain things that are different, and this weekend's going to be one of them. So yes, you can take some away from last year, but I think this weekend's going to start that maybe there are going to be some anomalies like Bowman and his improved speed and Blaney. I mean, last year Blaney, we talked about this countless times on how he'd kept loose wheels, pit stop problems, bad luck. He had a better race car than what his finishes show, and this year kind of starting the same way, but I think he looks quicker. Hence, he got the contract extension with Team Penske this morning and knows that he's going to be there on a multi-year deal. He's leading the points. He's scoring stage points. Yes, he hasn't had the finishes. Right now, he's only got one top 10
He
all
could have
year,
three
but he's still
wins.
leading the points. Yeah, easily. At least 3 top 2 finishes as we come in. So he's one. Him and Bowman are two that haven't had particularly great stats at Phoenix over the course of their careers, but I would put them as the top 2 favorites right now just because of how good they've done on the season. And if we talk about pure speed, those two have it.
Yeah. What did you think, since we didn't get a chance to talk last week about the decision? Uh, because Jeff Gordon commented about, well, it doesn't matter what he does. If he comes in, they're going to stay out. If he stays out, they're going to come in. But we've talked about this before. That was an old school way of thinking. Maybe when Jeff was racing, they used to do that. But they hadn't been doing that the last couple of years. This is the first time I've seen drivers. Well, first of all, I was surprised he came in. But then I figured if he came in, there
Yeah.
must be a reason for it, so everyone else is going to come in, and then no one else came in. And I just haven't seen much of that over the last couple of years. It seems like whenever the leader comes in, everyone follows, or when he stays out, everybody stays out. But for the first time in like over a year, maybe more, I actually saw a leader come in and driver stay out.
Yeah, they should have known. I mean, we've talked about this in the past, even last year. We were comparing mile and a halves. That Vegas is a track that's recently been repaved. You don't see a lot of tire fall off there. Now, if that same situation happens in Fontana last week, no brainer. Everybody's hitting pit road. The track's too abrasive. You could always use new tires. Vegas, that was just head scratching. Like, why would you pit? You have track position. We've talked about how important track position is. Minimal tire fall off. Plus, you got to look at the guys that finished even behind Logano in that race. Yes, Blaney and Bowman pitted, but look at the names: Austin Dillon, Bubba Wallace. I mean, guys, Ty Dillon, guys that you had to know were going to stay out. Austin Dillon was up there too. I mean, these guys, they knew they were going to stay out because they could take the track position and steal a finish. So I even thought, yes, they would have felt, I agree, like lame ducks, but they should have looked at who was on the lead lap too and known, hey, even if Logano and Jimmie Johnson and say Chase Elliott, I think he was already out by that point, but Alex Bowman, Chase Elliott, like that type of Hendrick camp, like they all pit, but Ryan Blaney still has the points, or the race leader at that time should have looked and was like, there's some guys that are 15th to 20th right now that could use a good finish that they're probably going to gamble and they're buffers for me. And look what happened to Logano. I mean, he took off, they were the buffers, and he won. So I feel like in a situation like this weekend in Phoenix, I wouldn't do it. It's known to produce a late race caution, but there's just not going to be a lot of tire fall off. So you just got to know the track you're racing on, the tire fall off, and know the situation, whether you should pit or not. And frankly, I don't agree with that call, and I didn't agree with it at the time when they did that.
Yes, see, that's why I look at it and I go, well, except for last week when once again Blaney's got some issues with the car. That reminded me of last year. The first two races, really, he should have at least finished second at the 500. We know that, and he should have
Yep.
won the week before, the week after. So that was just a bad call by the crew chief, who was a better crew chief upgrade, who's not supposed to make those bad calls for Ryan Blaney. But I still think, because 2 out of the 3 races were really just weird, bad deals that just went on that could be fixed, that this is the beginning of Ryan Blaney having a great year. I don't think he's just in about a month he's going to go back to being 8th and 9th and 15th one week and 13th another. I think we are now, this year, we are going to see the beginning of Ryan Blaney being one of the top drivers of the sport.
Yeah, and we've talked about that too the last couple of years. Like, when's Blaney going to come on? We know it's going to come, but when is he finally going to put it together? And I agree. This is it. I don't see any fall off. He's got some good tracks coming up as well. So I think this is the start, and I'm not mistaken. He was 28 to 1 to win the championship this year, and I think he's only gone down to when the season began. Yeah, he was, I think, 28 to 1 and maybe 16 to 1, 14 to 1. Yeah, so I'd put a lot of money on that, because if he wins this weekend and goes out and runs well these next few weeks, I think you're going to see him in single digits. And he's going to be that driver that we're all wishing, like, oh, man, wish I would have got him sooner.
Absolutely.
Because I think he's here to stay. I really do. Penske, they finished last year 5, 6, 8 in the points championship. I think there's a lot of improvement. The switch to the crew chiefs, I questioned it. Now it seems to be paying off, especially for Blaney and Logano. Keselowski may be a sitting duck. He may be out of that team anyways at the end of the year. So I feel like Blaney's going to get a lot of resources. It seems to be paying off with him and Todd Gordon. Granted, albeit that pit stop was different, but I think they do it differently anyways. He's leading the points right now overall. So, yeah, I think he's here to stay.
Taking a look at the 3 Penske drivers are 12 to 1 before practice today. Keselowski has never won at the track in 21 races. Logano's got 1 win in 22 races, but he hasn't had a top 5 in his last 6. and that's since his only win, 2016. And Blaney, he was the pole sitter of this race last year, start and finished third, led 94 laps. He was third in November. So that's a great sign considering how well Ryan Blaney has looked this year. 12-1, that's a generous number you want to take advantage of right now.
Yeah, and I had that in my preview this week. Penske is not a team that I would look as great. We've just been talking them highly the last few minutes, but they're not a team that I would look to be necessarily at their strongest this weekend. Phoenix has never been a great track for them. As you said, like Keselowski, look at the last 15 years in this race, the spring race, Penske hasn't won in it at all. And their only win was Logano in the playoff race, like 2016, I believe it was. So Keselowski's got 2 top 5 finishes since 2015, 19th and 10th last year. Yes, he was 7th in Vegas, 5th last week in Fontana. He seems to just have a solid but not great car. So I think he'd just be hovering 7th to 15th on Sunday. Logano, just 2 top 10 finishes his last 6 Phoenix starts. 1 top 5, his win obviously in 2016. So that's his last 8 Phoenix starts combined. So I don't feel really great about him. He didn't show a lot of pace last weekend. The only thing with them, with Logano especially, he's got to win this year already. So if I was Penske and knowing, which I'm sure we'll talk about this here in a little bit, with Phoenix now being the championship race, maybe he's your test car this weekend. Maybe you can just throw everything aside for him and say, look, we come back here in November, we want to try this, and this to be ready for that, because it's a championship race, whereas in the past it was the penultimate race. It was the last race of the round of 8. Then you get to Homestead. We haven't had this since 2001, to where you have a season finale race at the end of the year, but you visit there in the spring. So if I were Penske, I'd probably look long and hard about maybe using Logano's car as a setup test car, so you get all the notes you can to come back in November, because you hope that at least one of them's in the championship for. So that's why I don't put a lot of stock in Logano this weekend. They've done that in the past. I could see them doing it again. So Keselowski and Blaney would be the 2 options. And as you said, Blaney's got 2 third-place finishes last year, and those are his only top 5 finishes in 8 Phoenix tries. So kind of buyer beware with Penske this weekend.
What about the track itself? We talked about it a few weeks ago. This is where we'll see some of the rule changes come in, right? So
yes, this is the weekend. Yes.
What is that going to do to handicapping the race?
I would look at 2017, 2018. Last year, this is completely different. The downforce levels, that big spoiler that we've seen on the back, it's gone. It's going to be like a fourth of the size now. It's very small, so the downforce levels are completely different. The splitter in the front, smaller, so that's going to run different. The horsepower's back up, 750 horses, so you're going to have more horsepower and less downforce, which means it's completely the opposite way of thinking they've gone with this new car for the last 2 years. So if you're going to look at anything, look at 2017, 2018. But then again, you got to be cognizant that the PJ1 traction compound will be used this weekend in the turns, and it wasn't used in the 2018 race weekend in either of them. So it's going to be tough to kind of differentiate between the PJ1, the traction, and their setup's going to be different than 2018. But 2018 is going to be the place where I would start. So I wouldn't look at anything last year just because it's a completely different package. 2018 would be the one that I would definitely handicap off of.
What kind of racing do you think we're going to get? Because we sure didn't get good racing last week. I mean,
no.
I'm not seeing the changes that we need in the sport. It's not happening. Drivers are still, unless there's a caution, drivers look like they're back to being if you have a really good setup, you're going to blow away the field. You're going to run away with the race.
Yeah, and that's a reason why next year, because that's why they didn't want to do a lot of changes for this year. Most of the packages, there's only, out of the 24 layouts tracks they go to, 9 of them have this package like Phoenix. It's all short tracks and road courses because the racing was just terrible on these tracks last year. I mean, absolutely terrible. It was follow the leader you couldn't pass. The bigger tracks, they're like, well, we can't make too many wholesale changes because we've got a new car coming out in 2021 to hopefully help this, so why spend all the money and upgrades and changes and when we're going to work on that 2021 car? So that's why the short track's like, well, we can revert back to the 2018. That's an easy change because it's a short track, not a lot of aero. So I expect the racing this weekend to be better than last year, but we have to remember it's still Phoenix. It's tough. It's still tough to pass. So I don't think it's going to be anything we're going to see a drastic change. Will it be better? Yes. I think we'll see maybe a little more crashes, maybe a little more mistakes, because like the drivers have all said, this current car, like last week in Vegas and Daytona and like Atlanta again next weekend, that car has so much downforce and low horsepower that it's hard to wreck. They said basically if you get out of control, it's got so much downforce, the car is going to catch you. It's going to be hard to wreck it. But prime example of this new car, William Byron was testing the 2021 car in Fontana on Monday and Tuesday after the race, and he wrecked the new car. It's the only car they've got, and he wrecked it twice. The second time, damage that had to be done for the day. And like he said, if you try to get the most out of the car, it puts it back in the driver's hands, and he wrecked. He said that the car didn't catch him like does now. Phoenix, the car is not going to catch you, but it's a short track, so you're not going to see. Let's not get crazy and think we're going to see a bunch of passing up front and passing throughout the field. It's not going to be that way. We may see difference at like Bristol, somewhere there's more lanes to pass on. Phoenix, I think we're going to see better than last year, but don't get too high expectations
All
on
right,
it.
Chase Elliott, another one of the young drivers, actually had a good finish last week, even though a lot of that had to do with probably the caution coming out late and him gaining some track position because uh, he was kind of invisible for most of the race. But maybe he'll use that to springboard to this week. Last year wasn't a good year for him, so that's a good thing for Chase Elliott because you're
Yeah.
wiping out last year. And that means
Yes.
he's got 4 top 10s in 6 races if you wipe out last year. So 10-1. I still, I'm thinking he's worth a play this week because of the fact that, look, again, I believe, as I've said for the last couple of weeks, and so far it's happening with Bowman winning, with Blaney in first place. I do believe we're starting to see the young drivers now make their move. So maybe Chase Elliott could be the guy this week.
Yeah, they're starting to come through. And you got to look, if you want to go back to those stats of 2017 and 2018, Chase Elliott, granted, he finished 23rd in the playoff race of 2018, but that spring he finished third. And then you go back to the fall of the year prior, 2017, in the playoff race, he finished second. So 2 top threes in his final 3 tries under a similar package at Phoenix that we're running this weekend. He's definitely a strong play. I mean, he's off to a pretty good start. His finishes right now aren't showing it. 17th in Daytona, but he won a stage. He ran well. He just got caught up in a crash while being in the top 10 at the end of the Daytona 500. You're going to look at Vegas. He led the most laps. He swept the stages. He was running up front, and then he had a tire problem and relegated him to an outside top 20 finish. Last weekend, not really existent, like you said. He was just a solid top 10 car, not anywhere in the same zip code as his teammate, but he turned a top 10 into a 4th place finish. So if he could continue that streak up, he's got a package that he ran well at Phoenix. So yeah, for 10-1, it doesn't hurt to throw a little bit his way because I wouldn't be shocked if he won, especially with Chevrolet's resurgence that they've had this season. It just seems like they're firing on all cylinders. They've done a lot to improve, and Toyota's kind of came down a little bit. So I would not be shocked if Chase Elliott won this race on Sunday afternoon.
As far as the favorites, see, when you get 4 drivers between 3 and 5-1, it's kind of hard for me. Now, maybe I might take 2 out of the 4. It depends on how I feel about the rest of the field. But since I kind of think maybe Elliott, the way I think about Blaney, we'll get to another few drivers. I do have a few other drivers I like, and therefore, with better odds. Therefore, I'm only going with Kyle Busch. That's the only reason, by the way, I'm staying away from Hamlin. I think Hamlin's not a bad idea because he's had success here, even though, again, I mean, last year he had success winning the playoff race, but we've just commented on last year. But Toyota, let's also keep in mind, they've won 3 straight and 4 out of 5. But that's kind of the only reason. I would probably actually take Hamlin second in the group But I decided to just go with Kyle, almost all in. Half my money this week on Kyle. He looked good last week, so I think he's back to being Kyle. He's the defending champ, and not just last year, but he's just dominated this track. He's 7th or better in 9 straight races here. 8 of those are top 4s, 3 of those are runner-ups, 2 of those are wins, leading 76 laps per race during that streak. In his last 2 years at this track, second, first, second. I don't usually like taking drivers at 3-1, but if I'm going to take a driver between those 4, I'm just going to take Kyle.
Yeah, if anybody in the Toyota camp is going to win, it's got to be him. I mean, since the reconfiguration of this track a few years ago, he hasn't finished worse than second. Granted, he said that the Toyotas have been slow this year. They haven't been running up front. This is a track that speed isn't the end-all, be-all. It's going to be more handling. We got a different package. Obviously, we've talked about the downforce levels are lower, the horsepower is higher. It just seems to fit Kyle. I mean, you got to go back. Even if you go back to the years before this, his worst finish was 7th. The year that this package, a similar package, was run, he finished 2nd in this race and he won the fall race. So definitely for those odds, take him. Denny Hamlin scares me a little bit. Yes, he's got 7 top 10 finishes in his last 9 at Phoenix, but 2 of them were last year's package where he won. He just seems kind of like Keselowski. He might be around the top 10. I'm not real sold on him being the top 5 driver this weekend. Plus, you got to look, just like I said about Joey Logano, Hamlin's got to win this year. Gibbs has 4 cars at their disposal this weekend, but the one guy that's got to win is Hamlin. He expects to be back in the championship 4 come November. Maybe he tests out a few different setups in practice today. Go completely different 2 setups. You got the race you can experiment with. Fill your notebook when you come back in November. So maybe they experiment a little bit, so you maybe not want to go towards his direction at these odds. So I would definitely stick with Kyle. Truex, another teammate, I mean, was he 5-1, I believe, 4-1, somewhere around there. He's never won at Phoenix before, but he's been better since he's joined Joe Gibbs. He finished 3rd in the fall of 2017, 5th in the spring race of 2018. He was runner-up in last year's spring race, 6th in last November. Granted, the 2nd and 6th was with the higher downforce package. But
he only led 11 laps in his last 15 races there. Come on.
Yeah. So I don't know.
And I'm going to put money on Truex with those numbers?
I wouldn't. Granted, I will say he's been the best, I'd say, overall Toyota car this year. But I don't trust their pit road right now. It's kind of screwed them the last 2 weeks. They've made mistakes. He's strong at his track, but
he's a good driver. That's not what we're concerned about. It's everything else.
It's a win.
Him.
Yeah. So I just don't trust him this week. So I would say out of the Toyota camp, I'd say Kyle Busch for those odds. And maybe if you want to take a flyer on Erik Jones, he scored a top 10 finish in 4 of his 6 Phoenix starts. He finished 10th last week. Granted, again, different package, but it's still momentum. 33-1 entering this week was Erik Jones. I'm not sure if they've updated it this week or what he's at since, but I would say those are the 2 Toyota drivers I throw a flyer on is favorite Kyle Busch, flyer on Erik Jones, and the other 2 I would maybe save for another week.
What about Harvick? Because we know what kind of dominance he has at this track over his career. He's got 9 wins in 34 races, 15 top 10s in his last 16 races there. 13 of those are top 5s. 7 of those are wins. So what about Harvick? Is he your clear number 2 behind Kyle?
Yes, because this is a great track for him. But you can look at 2018. It wasn't the best track for him. Yes, he won the spring race and he was 5th in the fall, but like he said, he didn't have a ton of speed. He felt like they've been missing something the last few years. The year before that, he was 6th and 5th. He's a top 5 car for sure. Great fantasy play. I'm just a little wary because he hasn't shown a lot of speed this season. I mean, Daytona, he rode around at the back. He had a good race car, rode around at the back, ended up in the top 5. The last 2 weeks, Vegas, strong early run, faded as the race went on. Same thing with California. He was just terrible all around and lucked into a top 10, like you said, but he didn't have great long run speed. And we seem to be talking about Kevin Harvick a lot about that. His long run speed hasn't quite been there. So if he could stay on the lead lap because we've seen in Phoenix longer runs early and we've seen short sprints to the finish in the end. If that happens, then he's got a good short run speed. He could be there, but he needs to be on the lead lap. So I think he's a solid top 5 car. A little wary of his odds, but you definitely have to throw money his way because at the end of the day, you do want to win the race, and he's going to be there. But can his speed for the entire race be there is the question.
All right, some more Chevys to talk about, and another driver that I think is worth taking is Jimmie Johnson at 20-1.
Mm-hmm.
Jimmie's off to a nice start this year, and overall, even though he hasn't won here since 2009, he's got a pretty decent career here as he has in most tracks. So I just think at 20-1, we've seen the Chevys. They're off to a good start this year. Teammates got a win last week. I think the number's nice enough to take him.
Yeah, I mean, he's at 98 race winless streak. It's going to end sometime. The way he's running, we could see it. Phoenix used to be a strong track for him. He hasn't had a top 5 since 2015 there. Only 17 laps led since then. But you got to look at since then, he hasn't been on top of his game like he has now. It seems like he's finally back. But if you also want to look over his last 4 Phoenix starts, he's finished the top 15. He's been around the top 15. If you want to go back to 6 races, he's got 5 top 15s that time frame at Phoenix. I think he's better now than he was then. You look at his finishes he's had this year. So, yeah, for those odds, I mean, you're getting a guy that can win there at any given time. So I think they could swing for the fences a little bit this weekend towards the end, like maybe gamble and kind of we talked about Vegas. Phoenix is a track I got here. Out of the last 6 of the last 10 races at Phoenix, we've had a caution come out in the last 15 laps of regulation. So I think Jimmie's got himself in a position where, like in Phoenix, where people stayed out, I think he could stay out. What does it hurt? And they're looking for a win. This could be that weekend that they do it. So I would definitely, for those odds, Jimmie Johnson's definitely a play.
What about Larson at 15-1? He's got 5 top 10s in his last 7 at the track, 4 of those top 5s and a runner-up. The only thing I'm concerned about, he's only led 69 laps there in his career, so that's not. And again, leading laps has just been something he hasn't done a whole lot of the last year and a half or so.
Yeah, but he's been there. And this is a race. He's got 4 top 6 finishes in his last 6 Phoenix starts. You go back to 2018, he was 3rd in the playoff race. You go back to 2017, he was 2nd in this very race. So he knows how to get around there. Now that we're getting back to a package that suits his style, he likes more horsepower, less downforce. He likes to drive it in deeper in the corner. He likes a loose race car. I feel like this is a weekend that's going to favor him. Okay. He's shown some speed this weekend. If not for last weekend, kind of getting punted by his buddy Denny Hamlin there early in the race. He had a top 10 race car. I mean, Ganassi seems to have some speed this season too. They had speed under this package, 2018, 2017 range. So I would say, especially for his odds, Kyle Larson's a guy that I think's top 10 finish. I will say that now. I think Larson's going to get a top 10. He's finished top 10 in every race but one this year. And I think, again, they can gamble on pit stops. I wouldn't be shocked if him or like a Chase Elliott, Jimmie Johnson, those 3 are battling for the win in the end.
Bowman does have a dominating performance here in 2016. From the pole, he finished 6th and led 194 laps. So that alone, off the win, could make him dangerous as a strong top 10 this week.
Yeah, and he led 194 laps that day. Yeah, and he was this way last year. Last week. And so, yeah, I would throw some money his way, and we'll see what practice holds a little bit later today. We'll see what kind of game plan that they've got. I don't know if I were them, I would probably focus on trying to own it on a setup for November because the way he's running, I would not put it past him to make a sleeper championship 4 run. I mean, right now he's a top 2 driver. I don't think there's any question about it. Do you want to end that momentum and test things out for November, or do you just want to own in on something and think, hey, this package worked, this is what I want to bring back for November? So if so, this is a guy that I would think out of the Hendrick camp would be my favorite. Yes, the past stats don't say much other than 2016, but they didn't last weekend either. So I would say out of the Hendrick group, he's run the best. He's got the fastest car. this is a home race for him. He's from Tucson, just about an hour south of Phoenix. So I would say Alex Bowman is definitely going to be a factor this weekend in some way. Whether it be he helps with the setup for a teammate or he's landed another one and he can win. So definitely for 20-1, throw something Alex Bowman's way.
Okay, and then as far as any other drivers, I mean, Erik Almirola at 40-1 is interesting to me because he does have 5 top 10s in his last 5 races there. Di Benedetto still looks like he is going to be a much better contender this year, and he's at 40-1. So anybody else that you think could be a sleeper top 10 pick?
Just those two. I would say Almirola over Di Benedetto just because he's been strong at Phoenix in the past. He ran well this season so far. I think he's shown some good speed. Kind of Harvick level. He's got Harvick as his teammate to lean on for the setup. So I would say Almirola for sure. Past that, really nobody else. I think it's going to be the usual suspects up front. They're the big teams for a reason. They can adapt quicker than everybody else. So I would not be shocked to see a Harvick, Busch, Elliott, Larson, maybe a Kurt Busch. He's been solid, but not great. But again, he's got Larson as a teammate. He can bounce some setups off of. So other than that, I would say that's about it. I don't think you're going to see too many other sleepers win. The big teams are going to rise at the top this weekend for sure.
But this is a track where we are concerned with pole position. 9 of the last 11 winners started in the top 10.
Yeah, this will be one that, because of the short run speeds at the end of races, like I said, 6 of the last 10 have had a short run to the finish. Last year was a little bit of an anomaly because, again, like I said, that package, it's hard to wreck. I mean, we went 120 laps. This is the final green flag run last year. In this race, 78 in the playoff race. But if you go to the season before, 2018, the final green flag stretch was 4 laps in both races, telling it's a green-white checkered finish. So I think we'll probably see something like that this weekend. So you want to have good long-run pace, but your short-run speed is going to be the factor. I think at the end of the day, Sunday is going to win you the race. How good are you on your short-run speed to the finish? So qualifying position will definitely matter.
All right, that's going to wrap it up. So what do you have in store for the next few days as far as racereviewonline.com?
Same thing we've done the last few weeks. We're going to look at practice today and have a breakdown tonight on who do we feel is going to be the favorites for Sunday based off of single lap runs, 5-lap, 10-lap averages. And as I said, we'll kind of formulate it all in because of you're going to have to take in effect of long run speed because it has a potential to stay green longer. So who's got that to stay on the lead lap, but who's got the short run burst that can get there to the finish to win the race. So we'll combine all that and kind of spit out who do we think is going to win the race on Sunday. Based off that, Saturday will just be the qualifying report, who's starting where, and then Sunday will be race coverage.
Erik, appreciate it. And what's next week?
Next week will be the IndyCar season opener in St. Pete, and then NASCAR will also be in Atlanta. Much more favorable spot on the schedule for Atlanta now in mid-March compared to late February. This few weeks can definitely sway temperatures going in a better direction than a threat of snow and rain that they have had the last few years. So NASCAR in Atlanta, IndyCar in St. Pete for their season opener.
Sounds good, Erik. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you next week.
Awesome. Thank you. Appreciate it.